right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross podcast. And I'm your host, as always, Mark Ross. And with me this evening, I have a good friend of mine and fellow Milwaukee native, uh, Diane Littel.
Littel.
Littel. All right. I have her with me. She is the founder of Earthways Healing.
Mm-hmm.
And much well, we're going to have a good conversation about what she does, but something that I want you guys to understand, Diane is of mixed race. You have a lot going on, so I'm going to let you talk about that. And Diane, welcome to the show.
Well, hello, good evening. I'm gonna say Poso. My name, otherwise known as Kinu Nwetnen, which is Golden Eagle Wind. That is my spirit name. And I would say a more address the community, but I know more Ojibwe than I do Menominee because I have been a part of an Ojibwe lodge, healing lodge, which is part of my story as I tell you. So I would say Poso Ninue Magnadu. My name is Gnu Nudin, Indigenous class, Wabasheshi and Dodem, which is mean I'm a Martin clan. And so I'm also Miso Madeo. I'm a first degree Medewan of the Medewan Lodge. And so I introduce myself in that way in the lodge, and I want to introduce that way to you in the community. So I want to thank you, Mark, for inviting me and reaching out to talk on your show. I think it's really important to speak your truth, and it's very coincidental, maybe not, or serendipitous that your program is Speak Your Truth. And lately, I have been leading women and men to know their truth and therefore speak their truth, right? If they know their truth, they're able to speak it and walk it. So a little bit about myself. Like you were saying, I'm a mixed race individual, or they would call mixed blood in the lodge. Or native communities or indigenous communities. My mixed blood is German descent, Irish or Welsh descent. I just found out some new news. It might be even English now. I don't know. It's kind of changing. I got a genealogist kind of looking in my past to really connect the dots. And so I also have Sicilian blood, and I'm from the Menominee Nation here in Wisconsin, which is up around the Green Bay area. Okay. So I know my pedigree, so to speak. I know my certain degrees of what I am. So I'm split in quarters across the board. However, I identify more with my native indigenous side because my mom was really involved, and we would go to the reservation where she grew up, and we would be there most summers. Any kind of time we had off, we were always up on the reservation because my mom had land up there on the Menominee Reservation. And so, we just spent some time up there. So it was very difficult. So growing up, I was born in 68. I'm okay with telling my age. So back in the late 60s and early 70s.
You're older than me.
It's a good thing, right? When someone else is older, huh?
Yeah.
So I grew up in Milwaukee. I was born in Milwaukee. We lived on the south side. We actually lived next to Mayor Meyer back when Mayor Meyer was Mayor Meyer. And we lived in his neighborhood, and then we moved over into 23rd and Beach area, a very Catholic, predominantly Catholic Polish neighborhood. And I didn't realize how prominent or how native I was until we moved there. But I'm speculating now, I'm kind of rehashing, like when we lived in the other neighborhood on 29th and Scott, we're out, there was always fighting with the neighbors. And I was just a young kid. I was under 6, so I didn't understand what the fights were about. But my sister was 5 years older, and so she was always defending us against the neighbors. and my grandma. Well, my mom and dad had their own business and they were just really building it up. And so being able to build that business, they had to be away from the house. So I never understood what the fights were about. And then we moved to this predominantly Polish neighborhood, and then it really started to understand because I started to understand what people were saying and or how they were treating us. I might not look it right now. This is my winter color.
Yeah.
In summer,
Oh,
I'm a little darker color, but
okay.
not that dark, but darker. But as a kid, I was a little more darker than than most of the kids in the neighborhood. And so it became challenging. And my mom was a very, she was the Sicilian indigenous woman. And so she grew up on the res. So she grew up understanding racism more than I did because they live by Shawano County. So Shawano County is very, I don't want to say identify, I guess. I would assume they are. They come off as more of a red county, instead of the blue. Um, they identify that way. And
Mm,
so they really, anytime we traveled at any of the restaurants or anything like that as kids, my
mm,
mom was always very like challenging people. Why are you looking at us? You got a problem with us being here and the thing. So
wow.
she grew up with that
Hmm.
separation, and still to this day, there is like if you go rent a home or rent an apartment in Shawano area, it's hard because a lot of people ask if you're native or you're tribal, and if you are tribal, that they actually put you through the ropes even more so in your
Mm,
background check and stuff like that because
mm,
they really don't want to rent to people who are tribal. Um, it has softened, but it's still very present. But it was very known, very obvious when I was younger, and because it was always brought up. And even to this, I'm going to say when I moved my mom back up north when and during COVID, and I took her to a restaurant, and she would use the racial slur because we people would identify us with that N word and will call us that. And so my mom would identify herself as
whoa, whoa,
the
whoa,
N
whoa,
word.
whoa. Well,
Yes.
Diane, you said that people identified you as the N-word.
Yeah. Believe it or not. Yeah. So my mom
Oh.
always, like she would look at people in the restaurant, they're looking at me and they think I'm like, they think that I'm one of those, N words, and it's like, they're gonna call it to me, they're gonna tell me I am. I'm like, mom, and she has dementia. So it's like, so she takes it to the extreme, and so she gets really anxious and anxiety around environments that she doesn't, recognize people.
Oh.
And so she starts reverting back to when she was younger, like a younger mentality. And so she recalls those times when people did call her those things.
Mm.
And so, yeah. So, and believe it, it's like hard to believe, but like, okay, like it's odd that why were you identified as that? And it was like, because we were just darker skinned. And so back in the 70s, growing up in this Polish neighborhood, the city was actually, or our tribe was going through a lot. And to be realistic, we had a Menominee or a termination of the Menominee Natives uh, Act in Wisconsin that they were trying to terminate us as natives. And
What?
so that means it was a genocide of a people, right?
Right,
And
right.
so the act was from 1953 to 1972 is when it finished up. And the drum and the MEI, the Menominee Enterprise Incorporation, we identified ourselves and became a county back in the late 60s, early 70s. And this drum, it's an acronym for Determination of Rights and Unity for Menominee Shareholders. And so it was a group of Menominees that actually stood up for our rights and would challenge, go march. They marched to Madison to go against this because they had lied. Believe it or not, the legislature lied to us. The governor at that time lied to us and wanted us to turn over our rights as indigenous people, as Menominees, and assimilate and agree to this plan that would eventually eliminate us having a reservation and the need for this land. And back in the day, Chief Oshkosh is the one who agreed to the land and had bargained to have the land up there. But Menominee is one of the oldest indigenous tribes that occupied Wisconsin. So we had all the way up to Michigan and into Michigan and all the way down to Illinois area.
Wow.
So we had encompassed the majority, and then the whole chunk, which they called back in the day the Winnebago, because they were from Oklahoma area, and then they had taken on some what they call land allotments in not reservations but land allotments that the state had given them areas where they could live, and then we had over 9 million acres at one time where we lived, down to 235 acres. I mean, no, 235,000 acres. Okay.
From
So
9 million.
that's how they excommunicated us from our own land and pressed us on us. And so Chief Oshkosh at the time, from what I recollect, from what I read, is that he had negotiated that, let's send us over here to this spot where all these trees, this forest, because nobody wants to be there. The white people didn't want to be there, and I don't mean to offend anybody. The Caucasian people, non-native at the time, did not want to live on that land. So he knew that the land had resources, though, but they didn't realize how many resources there were. And then that's how we became Menominee Enterprise Incorporated, because we started a lumberyard and we started taking care of the forestry. And so it's one of the known forests by even NASA, and they use it as a locator point on the map. And from the satellites is our forestry area. And
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was about to say it's crazy that here in Wisconsin we have cities and towns with indigenous names, like Oshkosh.
Mm-hmm.
Chief Oshkosh.
Yeah.
How ironic is it, Diane, that we have cities and towns with indigenous names,
streets, everything? Yeah.
But here's the kicker: you were kicked out of those same lands that they gave indigenous names to, and won't let you live there. What the fuck?
Yeah. It is a conundrum.
You see that? You see that? There's a town named after your elder, but they don't want you to live in the town that. Come on, man. What? Make that make sense?
We should be angry. Yes.
Make that make sense?
We have every right to be angry. Absolutely. And then to top it off, like they have control over whether we can do gaming and stuff like that on our own lands. Yeah. So, and how they actually, from, like it says, there's documentation of all this and how they proceeded, and they depleted our funds and stuff. Eventually, we did win. We actually sued the state and the government, and we did win it. And then it gave us some allotment money to give some of the natives, some of the Menominee people, shareholders, a per capita. At that time, it was like at 18, they got their 18 monies, they would call it. And so they got an allotment of $1,500 because of this lawsuit. It was like some $8 million or something like that. And then they used the rest of it to develop the community, the infrastructure of the Menominee County that it is now. And there was so much pushback, all kinds of things. So in that that whole process. My mom was part of the drum community and the drum activists. She would go on the marches and she would do things, her and her friends. And then we go to these meetings that were in Milwaukee, and I believe it was at the old firehouse on Bruce Street, underneath the bridge there, the viaduct. Uh, there was an old green firehouse that we would go, and then they would have the big drum there, and we would have their meetings, and then they would do the drum, and then we would dance around, and eat. There was all kinds of, like family. It was like a family thing. But it was a meeting about what was going on, what was happening, what they were going to be doing, where they were going to be marching and stuff like that.
Mm.
And so, but we were just clueless. Mom never really actively got us involved. She just did her thing, and my dad just supported her. My dad just went along with it because he was just, my dad loved my mom. He was her best supporter.
Yeah.
So, my mom was 5'5", and my dad was 6'1" and a large man. And so my mom was this 5'5", like 110 pounds wet, that Spitfire, that you didn't mess with her.
Yeah.
She'd give you a what for. But she toughened us up. She was a tough mom. She was like, I'd have to say, if a child came into my office, I'm a therapist, I'm a licensed therapist, that if a child came in and told me that they were getting the whoopings that they were getting, like I was getting into my sister and brother, for getting,
Yeah.
I would have to call protective services on them. It's like, okay, let's say this is abusive. And yet later on in my life, in my 30s, I had actually asked her like why she was that way, because she was very nurturing too. She was very, um, we had a big garden. We always had fresh vegetables from our own backyard. She was a great cook. We always had family meals. Family meals were very important. And then she'd go back to work with my dad. So she was always there for mealtime, making sure we got our, my dad did their best to give us the best life possible. They really worked hard at it. They worked 16-hour days. My dad had an upholstery business. It was pretty prominent in Milwaukee. It was John's Upholstery Shop. And we did most of the restaurants, big restaurants in Milwaukee area, a lot of the Italian restaurants. My dad knew a lot of people, and a lot of, if you turned over a Greek restaurant's booth seat, and you probably see a card attached that said John's Upholstery Shop.
Nice.
We built it.
All right. That's what's up. You mentioned, Diane, that you guys moved up to the res or the reservation. What area was that you moved up to?
It was Kashina, Wisconsin. So Kashina, Wisconsin, is just past. It's about 20 miles away from, more north of Shawano. And my mom had land, so my dad had built. He made enough money to build some land, house up there, and we were intended to really just live up there. It was our vacation home, so to speak,
Okay.
someplace where we could go and live in the summertime. And then in the meantime, while it was being built, we would go up and stay with our relatives and our cousins. And when we would stay with cousins, we weren't native enough, we weren't res enough because we lived in Milwaukee. So we didn't belong up there, and we got made fun of and stuff like that. And because we weren't resi and whatever, whatnot. But we came down to Milwaukee, and we were too brown and too dark to play with the neighborhood kids because, so we didn't really know where we belonged.
Right.
And we really didn't know who was safe, because we get up on, we did the things with, the resi life. We went out in the woods and, drove mini bikes and motorcycles and, dirt bikes and whatnot, and fished and hunted on the land. And we did all that, just like they did, but we just weren't resi enough because we didn't live there.
So you were too dark to to hang around white folk, but you weren't brown enough to hang out with indigenous folk.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so you guys caught hell from both ends of the barrel.
Completely. Completely.
God.
Completely.
How did How did that, how did, knowing that, how did that make you feel? Like, I'm not good enough for these people,
Lost.
and I'm not good enough for these people. So where am I in terms of identity do you stand?
Exactly. And that lasted till I was 16 because it was like, I don't really know where. And then that's when we decided that my mom didn't want us to live up north.
Goodness
She
gracious.
was like, because I'm going to literally say, oh, on the res, there were no street lights. It was when it got dark out, it got dark out. And there were just a few lights along the main highway, which is Highway 47. And that was not that great. It was, like I said, very few along the way, just because people would be driving to, people were traveling to other areas, Anago and stuff like that, because they would use Highway 47. They'd be driving through the res. And so there wasn't no street lights. So when it got dark on the res, it got dangerous. And so, and the land that we had up there and the house that we had up there, we would leave it vacant, and then people would break in and vandalize our home.
What?
And so that was lateral, like we talked about lateral oppression, right? So that was, they were laterally oppressing, and it was like a family war. Like they thought that was their land, and it wasn't my mom's land, and that we shouldn't be there. So they were trying to shove us out. And so we were fighting against a particular family up there on the reservation and constantly going against them. And the guy that he was actually the sheriff at the time. So the sheriff and his children were vandalizing us. And we couldn't go to anyone because the sheriff wouldn't prosecute his son
Right.
and his nephews and whatnot. And so we couldn't do anything about it, although we found the stolen property on their property. And so it was very difficult because the more we fought back, the more they retaliated. And the
Sure.
only reason why it didn't burn down is because, they couldn't burn us down, is because my dad had built the place out of cinder blocks. So the whole building was made out of cinder blocks except for the roof. Because we're living in the forest, my dad figured it won't burn down. If anything, a forest fire comes, we're still going to be safe. So, anyways, so
Wow.
we had to eventually board it up really well, put like 4 inch to 5 inch screws into the wood so that they couldn't like unscrew and break in and cause hell. Because we fixed it up and finally sold it back to the reservation
Mm. Mm.
because we just couldn't maintain it anymore. And none of us kids could move up there because we all had jobs down here, and it would have took too much, and the fight was still there. So most of them had died off now, and so it's changed, and now somebody else owns it. And so it's okay. It's like, but it was like a legacy that my dad wanted to build for us and my mom. And, and it's sad that we had to let it go because of the lateral oppression that we had encountered.
You know, Diane, I want to ask you this. Has there been other, and I'm going to ask, has there been any other indigenous people like yourself that went through that up there, up north?
I would have to say yes. Because there were other like Menominees that were living, and I had found out later on in life that when I was on the uh, Indian Summer Festival's board of directors, and I met a gal. Her name was I don't know if I can mention her name, but anyways, she lived. She was a neighbor. Lived next to one of the Polish neighbors that was telling us to go back where we belong. That she was getting told the same thing, and we never knew because we didn't step out of our backyard that often to notice who were our neighbors.
Mm,
Because every time we stepped out of our backyard, someone was telling us to go back where we belong.
that's crazy.
And it's like, well, I don't know where that is. Like we're here, we live here. And as a kid, being told that at 8, 7, 8 years old, going, go back where I belong. I'm going at my house. And then my mom had to explain to us what they meant by that. And it was like, well, why are they saying that to us? Like, even still, we belong here. This is our land.
Absolutely.
They're
Absolutely.
from Poland. They're Polish. They speak Polish, and it's like, and they're sometimes they're screaming at us in Polish, and it's like, you're the one who doesn't belong here. You're the immigrant.
How about that?
Yeah, yeah. So it was very hard, but there were others. And then I'm gonna say our cousins would come down to Milwaukee and they felt like outsiders, but we never treated them like my mom never treated them like outsiders. They were always welcome in the house.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying my aunts and my uncle was a little special one. But my aunt always welcomed us too. She didn't treat us, but it was their children, and I'm going to say that was a trickle down effect because their dad, how he had talked about other people,
Mm.
and I'd have to say he was a bit of a bigot. Yeah. Being a native man, he was a big, a pretty big bigot. Yeah. And then he would make fun of my dad. My dad
Mm.
was a white guy, and then he would do all, help him out because my dad was very mechanically inclined. And so he would help build things and do things, but they would still make fun of him. But because he was a
Mm.
big guy, you know, he could hold his own ground. And then he didn't have no reason, he didn't feel like he had anything to prove. So he never fought anybody or had to fight anybody because I think because of his size, I think they didn't want to, see what they would, how they would get in kind of fight with him.
Mm. Mhm. Excuse me.
So it was very troubling. So like in that day, and I'm saying it's 1975, there was also where they were they were attempting to bring more natives to Milwaukee area and or provide schooling to the native children in Milwaukee. And that was the Indian Community School that was on 31st and State. And so when they wanted to really develop it, people did not want us there. And so there would be spray painting on the walls, garages, only good Indian is a dead Indian, go away Indians,
Mm.
Indians are not welcome here. And so and my mom didn't want us to see that, but it was all part of like, it says, we step out, somebody wants to kick our ass. Somebody wanted to beat us up. And so, and we just thought that was just another day.
Mm.
That was just living,
Hmm. Yeah.
feeling like different, but not really knowing like this is just their experience.
And Diane, first off, is that school still there on 31st and State?
Actually, they changed it. There is another school there, yes, and they actually redeveloped it and moved out in Franklin and
Mm.
made a state of the art, beautiful Indian community school. So it's beautiful. The Potawatomis had taken over where the Indian community school was and made it into their corporate offices and stuff like that, and actually have other indigenous offices and or companies that are within that school. Yeah.
Mm.
So
And
there's still some the elders go down there to eat breakfast and stuff. So there's like elder programs that they offer
cool,
to the elderly too, the
cool,
native elders.
good, good. Uh, Before we started the show here, viewers, listen, ladies and gentlemen, we we had a short conversation about uh what Diane framed during our first initial conversation is a colonized frame of mind. Uh, uh, and I bring that up to say that racism is something that is nothing new to us. We see it, and we most of us have experienced it more than one occasion from other people that don't look like us. But what hurts me is when I see people that look like us, people that look like me, people that look like you, that exhibit that colonizer's frame of mind.
Yeah, that mindset. Yeah,
Like, like I owe you something because your mindset is that of your oppressor.
correct. You identify now. You've taken on that oppressive language, and
Yeah,
somehow now I want to be one up on you.
yeah,
It's like the idea of capitalism, right? Everybody wants to be ahead. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Everybody wants to make the money, the big buck, because money drives things, right? And so I think money is part of the oppressive language. And because I've worked for five different tribal, behavior healths. And so I worked for five different tribes from Michigan to and Wisconsin. So two different tribes in Michigan and three different tribes in Wisconsin. One was my own. And the lateral oppression on the reservations is that colonized way of thinking, right? Is that somehow I'm going to take you out, take you down. And they use the grievance process. And, the grievance process, and I had to question in some of these people, I said, do you understand what the grievance process was created for? For people who didn't receive the services and or felt like they were not mistreated while they were being taken care of in a facility. That was the grievance process, what it was for. But they were using it as a process to get other employees fired.
What?
It was a means to create that, to oppress another employee by saying that somehow they did something wrong to them, and would create this narrative. And a lot of times I say the bigger the family, the more lateral oppression you had. And it was about becoming in those tribal seats, the tribal council seats, the tribal legislative seats, because, it gave you status. And again, the money, status is can create that greed mentality and that greed mindset, and somehow I'm different, I got to be better. And because I worked at the Native communities, I even had people who were like in their late 60s and 70s that did not want to identify as Native because they grew up in that termination, right? They grew up when they were being told that they couldn't be who they were, and they had to assimilate, and they had to go to a white family and marry a white person or a Caucasian person. And so that the termination was to bleed the blood out, or like to breed the blood out of the
Breathe the
person.
blood out.
Yeah. So they wanted you to inbreed with other people so that we would become extinct, and then they could come in and take our land because there was no more Menominees to hold the land.
Yeah, yeah.
And so a lot of them didn't understand that. And the Jesuits, the Roman Catholics, they identified with Catholicism up on the res. And my grandma and my mother are both residential school survivors. And the residential schools was part of like how they would assimilate you and not allow you to um, partake in your own traditional values, your culture. We don't call it religion because it was a way of living.
Mm,
Uh,
mm,
our prayers wasn't a religion; it was just what we did. We spoke to the Creator. We spoke to, it was just something. It was a life. It was something that we did, and it was ceremony. And we had our ceremonies, and so it's like you don't. It's not a religious aspect to it. We just knew that there was this, great mystery, or this great Creator that created all of this, and there's stories and there's teachings on that and how it came about and who was the original the man that came on and walked in the four directions and found these different people, right? And then he brought back this knowledge and this information to their tribes, and told them about, like, hey, I was over here in the east and I saw these people in the east, and I saw these people in the north, and I saw these people in the south, saw these people in the west, and this is what they look like, and and they spoke different languages and blah 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 blah, and so and I'm going to say from the Ojibways, because I belong to, as I was working through some of these tribes, one of the tribes, the Stockbridge tribe, I was able to meet some people who were part of a medicine lodge called the Medewin Lodge, and it just romanticized me because it was like this, what the chief of that lodge would call our blood memory. Okay, we all have blood memory, and remembering what our ancestors had taught us, right? And where our ancestors had come from. It's almost like epigenetics too, like that genetic DNA within us that we can hear or feel, like when the drums play. Okay, I don't know about you, when you hear the tribal drums, for yourself and your nation, right? And you just want to get it and you just want to start dancing, right? You just can feel it. It's in your soul. And it's like, oh man, it just makes you want to like stand up and like own it, right? And the
Yeah.
same thing is like, you hear the native drums playing, it was like, it would just make me so emotional, make me, very like, I'm missing something. And so when I went on this journey, moved away from Milwaukee and started my path of really discovering like what it was really like to travel down that more traditional path,
Mm.
and hearing these people singing the songs and the language, the Ojibwe language, and it was like, oh, it was like it just stroked my soul, and it was like, this is so beautiful, and I wanted to be a part of, so I became a part of it, and I have actually went through the process of becoming, first degree Medewan, and so and there's several degrees up to like eighth and ninth degree, and you really are older when you're at that level. And at each level of this medicine lodge, there's more that comes to you, an understanding of life, and there's teachings along each path, and you have a different understanding of these teachings at each time you're taught. And but it's just beautiful, the songs, the drumming, the ceremonies, the traditions. And I'm glad that they had, those who actually maintained them, that they're not completely lost. That I felt very fortunate that I'm still part of that, and I still can go to that, and we celebrate and we do these ceremonies 4 times a year. And the Medewan word actually means the way of the heart, and it's the way of the heart of that medicine. And it's, you just know it's like in here, and you hear it, and the songs that they sing. And it's like, and when I heard one of the songs that I was taught on my path, becoming a Medewan first degree, one of my songs, the song talks about that. Can you hear the spirit? Can you hear, the great spirit? Can you feel the great spirit? And it was just like, just makes you so emotional. And you hear the song, it's just like, the words are very powerful, and it's like, and it's in the language I didn't understand it, but I knew it was something amazing.
Mm.
And then when the language speaker told us what it meant, it was like, that's incredible. So on my path, growing up, um, feeling very different in just in society, feeling very different in my family, because um, there was sexual abuse by a family member, a cousin of mine that was living with us. He had lived with us ever since he was a baby. My mom took care of him on and off for most of life until he was older. Then he just lived with us permanently. And then after that, he got shipped off back to his mom down to California because his mom moved down to California.
Now, did you talk? Did you when the episode happened? Did you talk to anybody about that? Or
Gosh, no, no. Mom was hard. Mom was rough. You didn't tell mom nothing. That was that you were doing naughty. So
yeah,
it was like, it felt like, it was a bad thing. So I'm not gonna like, because I felt like it was a part of it.
yeah.
And I was already kind of a klutzy kid, so mom always yelled at me for being klutzy. So I didn't want to put more heat on me.
Well, so you didn't want to get a spanking or a whooping, as we call it in the hood.
It was a whooping. Let me tell you, it was a whooping.
Don't disturb mom. Even
Get
even
your,
if you
it was
got hurt,
you'll
don't
get
bring
your
it to
ass
mom.
whooped. Yes.
Wow. But how did that impact you? I mean,
Oh,
being
I
right,
felt very different even from my siblings, because it wasn't happening to them.
just
It was
you.
just happening to me. And so at 10 is when I said something to my sister, but I didn't tell her what. I just said, something's happening. And then my mom just, it went crazy. And then mom was like very difficult with me then and very hard on me. And it was to protect me. I understand that now. But as a girl, I didn't understand that. I thought I was being blamed because now my cousin was gone. He had to get kicked out of the house. And I thought that was my fault. And as a
Mm.
kid, like I got him kicked out of his home, you know? He was like my brother. And so I was like, now he's gone. And it's like, okay. And but yet, like, no one said, hey, what happened? We need to get you to therapy. And therapy wasn't a big thing back then. I'm gonna tell you, as a therapist, incest happens, you know, in families more often than people realize. Some inappropriate touching happens at some point in a family, and it's like how you handle it and take care of it, how you address it, both parties. Is it a family member or is it somebody that's way older? Because my cousin was, well, he was like 5 years, 7 years older than me. Was he that much older? He was just a kid too, you know? And looking at it that way, I don't blame him. I want to blame my parents too, but they were winging it too, doing the best that they could as well, you know? And they were doing what they could to provide a home for us. So it's like we were left supervised by these older siblings, right? And so led to opportunity, right?
Mm.
So, and it was like they didn't know. And then I wanted to blame them that they didn't keep me safe or like tell me like it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through this. I'm sorry that happened to you, you know? And it was like, okay. So that was part of my path. And I discovered alcohol. My dad was a gambler. So he liked to gamble at the moose lodges and he won a lot of bushels of booze. I don't know if you ever know, have you ever seen a moose lodge bushel basket of booze?
No.
Man, it's like a heaven for an alcoholic.
Oh, oh.
It's like those old like apple bushel baskets, right? Where you picked apples from the apple orchards, those old
Yeah,
time
them
wooden
old
bushels.
barrels. Yeah.
Yeah, barrel, and they stuffed it with alcohol, and then you would gamble, and you would do like the turkey shoots or whatever, whatnot, and pick cards or whatever, whatnot, and you'd win this big bushel of. He won several of those, and then also he was a card player, and he is a little bit of a card shark because he is a card counter. So he would win a lot, and he won some card games, and where he won cases of Lowenbrau beer and cases of Lambrusco wine, and so my parents were not drinkers. My dad was a gambler and an overeater. He loved food
Mm.
and gambling.
Mm.
Mom, because my grandma was the alcoholic on the reservation, my mom did not like alcohol. She'd have one drink and she's like, nope, and losing control. Nope, nope, don't want to lose control.
Yeah.
She was like,
She
we
she
don't
saw what
lose
it was like.
control. No, yeah,
Mm.
we are in control all the time. Because she
Mm.
used to haul my grandma out of the bar. When you know where National Liquor is on National.
What national?
Na 27th and National. It was
Okay.
the one of the biggest. It was back in the day. It was one of the common bars, National Liquor, National Bar on National Street, National Avenue,
Huh.
and that's right where the McDonald's is. Right across street from the McDonald's is now over
Okay.
there.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
there's a right across the street. There's a National Liquor, and so my grandma would warm a seat there, and my mom would have because my we lived on 29th and Scott, so my mom would have to haul her butt
Oh
out of
God, yeah.
there and
South.
bring her
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
home, and and she'd be crying in her beer, and my mom was like, yeah, like she hated it, so she
Oh.
despised alcohol and what
Mm.
it did to her mom, and so um yeah, so that led to me, dipping and dapping in, alcohol, and I could take a couple bottles up to my room, and mom didn't. And mom was, I'm gonna tell you, mom didn't. She noticed at times, and she'd go through the room, and she'd find, like I dabbled in pot smoking. She'd find cigarettes in the pot pipe,
Oh, she's a
whatever
mom.
the pot.
Moms are good at that. You know what I'm saying? And how old were
She
you when
would.
you, how
I
old were
was
you?
10. I was 10.
Holy
Up
crap.
until 16, I would have been considered a child alcoholic because I would drink before I went to school and drink at
Wow.
school. I would take a 20-ounce bottle of soda, half and half. Okay, so back in the day, five alive was a thing back then. There was the orange juice blend. So I would mix that with Starsky's whiskey, have that for breakfast on the way to school, smoke a couple joints with some friends at school because we went to Walker Middle School over by the Sixth Street cop shop or Sixth District cop shop, and so we would smoke back at the cop shop and go into school, and then and at lunchtime I would drink my half 20 ounce 10 ounces of uh brandy and Coca-Cola, and that was the rest of my day. Come back home, have a couple of hits off of my one hitter, go to bed, you
Wow.
know, and
10.
mom was for the most part, like I says, they were so busy, they were working all the time, and like it wasn't their fault that they didn't notice. And then I would have to say one of my other loves too was like I was a cutter too. I would, be
Mm,
self-harm and do this,
hmm
but it became too obvious, and mom would notice. The
mm,
drinking and the drugging, she didn't notice as much.
mm,
So I just continued with that. But the cutting was just as addictive as the alcohol and the drugs.
mm.
And it
Now,
just went into it, and then, you know,
wow. So, well, thank you for uh being transparent
yeah.
in terms of your journey and what you had to go through because I mean, geez, it's like one thing led to another and another thing
Oh,
led to another thing, and you know what I'm
snowballed,
saying? Yeah,
snowballed.
yeah,
Because I'm gonna
yeah.
say, and I told her later on in my 30s, because I did get out of the house. My dad kicked me out because my mom and I was very much because I was into the self-harm, I found weights. So I started weightlifting and I became really diligent on like the stronger I was, no one was gonna ever hurt me, because my mom would always like find a reason to come and terrorize me at nighttime, rip my blankets off, pull me out of bed. She was constantly at me, whooping my ass. And it was like I was doing something to get my ass whooped. And so, and this is like, and probably created more things to get my ass whooped because the only attention I was getting, right?
Mm,
And so, in that, I became really hard and like lifting a lot. And then we got to a point where we were really fighting, and my dad had enough. He's like, I can't have you fighting with my wife anymore. You need to get out. And I'm like thinking in my head, like, that's my mom. Like, your wife, that's my mom.
mm,
Like, why do you say that? Like, geez, like I'm an outsider, like, even felt more so. So I got kicked out and I moved in with my high school sweetheart. I went to Milwaukee Tech and found my husband there. Good place to boys tech, to go find a boyfriend or, a husband.
yeah,
A lot of husband material there. I don't know about now, but back then it was.
yeah, right, right, right. Wow.
So in that, moved in with him, and his dad was an alcoholic. And so I had a, husband that would potentially be alcoholic, which he did. We both drank together. And, we had two kids, and we actually were quite established. I found myself a hard worker like my dad. He worked very hard. We bought a home. We were in our 20s, bought a home, had land, had cars. We had things, for being a young couple. I stopped using when I got pregnant. Got pregnant in high school, my senior year. Had my oldest son. Got married. Before got married before I had him. 6 days before I had him, we got married,
Okay, okay.
just in the nick of time. And then we got divorced at 25. And
Mm,
so it was like because of the alcohol and drugs, and he wanted to belong to a particular motorcycle club that occupies Milwaukee area,
mm,
and that he wanted to be a part of that. And I didn't want nothing to do because we had it in our neighborhood. We grew up with them. He didn't. He grew up in the burbs on the
mm,
outskirts of Milwaukee, and so he never knew what the motorcycle clubs were about. Thought it was cool. And I was like, well, I know what it's like to know. I've seen kids that, are from those families, and it's nothing cool about it,
nothing cool. Yeah.
And so we got involved in that, the deeper he got involved, and we saw some things, and, we're part of some things. And it's like, I don't want nothing to do with this.
Uh-huh.
And he had an affair, and it gave me an out. And so, I bless that woman every day for getting me out. We bless each other because I helped her get out too.
Oh, damn.
Later on, I was able to help her get out
Oh,
too.
damn.
So, which was
Wow.
nice, which is a good part of the story too, because
That's crazy.
I call her a half daughter. She has no relation to me, but she's my son's half sister, but she's my half daughter, and she calls me Mama D, and there's no bad blood between us.
Mm,
There's no
mm.
reason to be angry at a baby that came along, didn't want to be here, didn't ask to be here. But anyways,
Well, talk
that
about,
got me.
oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, I was about to say, talk about your company and how
Yes, I would say
what,
that's how I got into that.
Yeah, yeah,
That whole alcohol thing,
yeah,
it got crazy. 25, blew up, lost my mind, got deep in it,
yeah.
And then I had two DUIs, crashed my car,
Mm,
and I was involved with some guy that had a record that was a mile long. Got me going to AA. He says like this is how you manipulate the system. Get into AA, tell the judge that and he'll give you your time off, and you will get off. And blah 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 blah. And I was like, okay, I'll do it.
yeah,
Something happened though. Magic happened. I got sober and I found recovery, and he didn't, and I had to leave him. And up until that point, and I was talking to one of my sponsees recently about how I truly believed I didn't have any other options up until I was 30, up until I got into AA, that booze, drugs, bad relationships, bikes, all of that was going to be my destiny. You know, figuring, sitting and worrying about how to F am I going to get out of this now, and probably back into another one. Truly did not believe in my mind. And I was a smart woman, still am. And it's like, I truly believe that that was just the cycle I was going to be in for the rest of my life. And then when I got into AA, it really changed my way of thinking. And then I went back to school and I said, what do I want to be? Someone was talking about it. I was actually doing UAs for the Department of Transportation and drug testing uh, truckers. And so found someone talking about going back to school for counseling. And I said, people always talk to me, random people out of nowhere, telling me their life stories, and it's like gets a little like, why are you saying this to me? Like, why are you telling me this? Like, I don't understand why you're saying this. And so I said, okay, I might as well become a therapist. And part of that though, when I was in school at 16, I did quit for a little bit. And part of that quit was because of a counselor by the Mr. McGuire. I don't know if he's alive. He might be. But I thank him because he's the one who planted a seed, that I could be somebody different, but I didn't know how. And when I got into AA, that seed was still there. And I was like, okay, I'm going to believe in these people who are counselors. And I had to go to outpatient, and my outpatient therapist happened to be a recovering alcoholic too. And really just called me out of my stuff. And then eventually it was like full circle. Once I got my license to be a substance abuse counselor, I went to MATC, got my human service degree, got my at back in the day it was RADC, my registered alcohol and drug counseling
yeah, yeah, yeah.
certification, and
Hmm.
started off and worked for it was a company called Axe, uh, and it was on 60th and Capitol, and they were a
Yeah, yeah.
faith-based organization.
Hmm.
And so, and then I did some moonlighting with Bob Knoop, Brighter Days Counseling. And so Bob Knoop was my counselor, and he hired me on to be one of his counselors. And so it was like I felt like a wonderful full circle that he got me into that. And then as I got into my bachelor's degree and really like soaring, getting really, into this, I was worked for Aurora, had to leave Aurora. And I had in 2005 experienced a sweat, which is an indigenous ceremony where you go in and yeah, sure you sweat, but there's medicines involved and the spirit inside there. And as you're in the lodge, I had an experience, and I have gifts, and I've had gifts since I was a little girl,
Mm.
where I see dead people, I hear dead people, and I know
A medium?
things. So yeah, so I'm a psychic medium, and I have all the clairs, majority of the clairs. Like I have what you call psychometry. So if somebody hands me something and they ask me to like, what do I sense? What do I feel? I tell you like there was a person that it belonged to this or it was here, and it, like a past life or what was going on, where it was from. I can like people coming in like certain sessions. So at 2005, I had that experience. My three grandmas came and visited me in this lodge while I was in there sweating. And the woman facilitator, the conductor of the lodge, she came and asked me later and asked me what I saw. And I didn't have to be afraid of what I saw. And I was like, not talking about it. I don't know. I don't know what you know. I don't know what you know. And I did not have no clue at this time about Native traditional stuff. That was my first experience of like, and then I just felt I needed to know more, which took me up to the reservation to that person who led me to the Medewan Lodge. And then more answers came there and more answers kept coming and more coming. And I had actually got trained in Reiki energy healing.
Okay.
So I'm a Reiki master teacher and I did all the 3 levels. I did all of this because I needed it. I needed more. And then I did aromatherapy. I did all these things. And as I did these things, it felt like I had to. I was being pulled and drawn to do this. And then as I started doing that and I was working for Aurora, I opened a company called Earthways Healing. And I don't know why I called it Earthways Healing, but it felt right because to be in touch with the earth, because I always identified with the earth. I always felt like home at home when I was out in the woods, when I was out by the water. It just felt like very comforting, soothing. So Earthways Healing. And so started it. I had my office on Highway 100 in Lincoln, where the old Indian Summer Festivals building was at. I occupied there for a little bit, journeyed when I moved away in 2013 and was on the res, still kind of dabbled in my own business, kind of put it on hold because I wanted to finish up with my licensure and all that, because that's what I went to school for. I got my master's, and damn it, if I'm going to set that aside, I was going to do this. And at that time, LPCs couldn't bill uh, directly. Like if I was on my own private practice, I couldn't bill for certain services. I'd have to have, well, I could, but I had to have certain many years. So it was like a making and a building of like, okay, one day I'm going to actually be my own, practitioner, my own business and carry on that name again. And it didn't happen until COVID, where I really just said I took the leap. I worked for several different tribes, and then it was like it just was dysfunction, and I didn't want to work for that anymore. And I got a lot of PTSD from working for tribes. All the lateral oppression, I've had enough. Up to here, none, done.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm gonna break off on my own, and I took the leap in 2020 and said Earthways Healing, and I'm gonna call it intuitive care because with the Reiki energy, sensing the energy in a person's body, I see so many different things when they talk to me and connect the dots for them. And so I take the intuitive care is a blend of like your traditional, I'm going to say westernized approach and modalities, where I'm a bit of a gestaltist, where it's like the empty chair and role modeling and role playing, and also now somatic, like the body stuff, the somatic breath work, somatic healing, doing somatic exercises, and also internal family systems. So it's all part of the Gestalt theory. And so I discovered that I'm more of a Gestalt styled therapist. And I also was more of
The
a
Gestalt therapy theory. I'm sorry.
Gestalt therapy is where you believe that there's like this sense of meaning. Like, is there's a connection, how like I'm connected and looking, searching for that meaning and connection. And when we search for that meaning connection, it's like that empty chair. It's like, I want to make sense of why this person did this to me. So I'm going to set this person in this chair and have this conversation with them, even though they're not there, and pretend I'm going to have this conversation with them and understand. So like this, I'm going to bring it outward. So it's like the inner child work, all that kind of stuff. Okay. The internal voice. What is this voice, this narrative that's going on in my head, and challenging it and putting it outside of me so I can like talk about it. So I was also more of a experientialist, where we have to live these experiences, and then how would they shape us, right? Because I went through AA, I went through all these I had to experience all that hardship in my life to become who I am today. And then existentialist is like searching really for the meaning of my life, and trying to make meaning of my life. And understanding again, all of that came from like who I was just growing up, and it gave me, it made me have more understanding of who I am, and like all the schooling that I did, like Eric Erickson, all these like things through the psychology that formal teachings really helped me understand like how my brain was developed, how it came to be who I became. So that's the existentialist, and all that. And like it says, the experiential too is like that more hands-on stuff. I like to be like, let's use the crystals. Let's put some crystals on your body. Let's do some aromatherapy. And then, like I said, the Reiki, it's hands-on, and or doing collages, artwork, anything like that, where it would help you make sense of your world. Because traditional therapy and just sitting there doing just straight CBT and not stepping outside of the box felt so sterile. I wanted to see the person, encompass them as a whole. And so that's what my company does. I see a person as a whole. And I have some clients that they have a tendency to like go a little longer. So I won't plan nobody after them. So we can go a little longer, but I don't charge them more. I just charge them the flat rate for the hour. And we might go a half an hour longer. And they're very thankful and grateful that, I'm glad that you take the time for me to do that, because it's like we get into the talking points, and then all of a sudden it's like we get to the meat of it right towards the end, and it's like I don't know how to shut up. I say, and I understand that, and it's not that I don't lack boundaries, and it's part of like that native way of like seeing a person and being present with a person, and that's part of like that traditional aspect of healing. And my grandma once told me when I was 16 and we're sitting in her bedroom, she had said that people would come and talk to her. And it finally clicked with me when I was going into my counseling classes at Mount Mary University, that it's actually in the family. My grandma was the talk therapist, and people would pay her with food and items and stuff to help her support her five daughters. And so they would come and ask for advice. And my grandma was telling me, like, she would tell them, she'd give them advice and stuff. And they come and like sit in her home and talk with her. And I was like, oh, wow, go figure. I got into therapy. And then I also like have this sense with plants. I want to say that plants talk to me and they want me to do things with them. And so I'll make tinctures and salves and stuff like that. And that didn't come until later on in my life, my 50s. And uh, I have great, great, great aunts. So there's like generations of healers in my family on the native side. And so they are seers too, the psychic mediums. And it's documented how far back it goes. That I know five, it could go back 13 generations. I don't know, but five I know of for sure, that uh, there were great, great, great aunts that were medicine people. And there is actually documentation of that, where that they were part of like the women that they came to help heal people in the tribe. So in that, it says I incorporate brain spotting, EMDR, all the techniques that I know. This is my toolbox is pretty full with a lot of like tools.
Sound like you got a lot in the toolbox there, Diane.
Yeah. So it's the most recent, like it says, it kind of it when I found out what your name of your podcast was, Speak Your Truth. And so I have started doing these retreats with women, the Soul Goddess Journey retreats. And that's what we talk about: know their truth, not their worth, not their value, but know their truth. Because when you stand in your truth, you're not going to say and talk about this worth shit, because you can't buy me off of no damn shopping shelf. Ain't no price tag on this woman. So, and I also have men's retreats too, beneath the armor, because men put up this I'm going to say this toxic masculinity, where they feel as though they have to be this man to be this man. And they're not. It's not that they are being toxic to other people, because a part of it is, but most of it is being toxic to themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, so
Yeah.
it's like taking down that armor and saying, like, just be you, just be the
Yeah.
man, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
like, and what does that mean? Because most of us don't know, like as a woman, it's like, I didn't know what that was to be a woman, as a
Yeah.
young girl.
Yeah.
Sometimes some men don't know what it means to be a man because they didn't have role models to be the man.
Say that again.
Yeah, I know. Some men did not have men showing them how to be good role models.
And some still don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And they left, I'm gonna say my dad, he was emotionally unavailable, but he worked. So the role model that I like to model, like what kind of husband I would have in my life, he wasn't there to show me. So I had a lot of emotionally unavailable men in my life, or people who
Mm.
are unavailable, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's like if I had someone who actually took the time for his family, and actually was present more, I probably would have had a more present man in my life.
Mm. So you think this is more of a learned trait or
Yeah,
energy related trait because
a
energy
hundred
begets
percent
energy.
energy related. Yes, energy related. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's just like like the wounded, uh, the father wound and the
Mm,
mother wound. Like I
mm.
had my mother wound because she didn't protect me and she didn't love me after I was abused,
Damn.
sexually abused. So I resolved that mother wound years ago because we had a conversation about it. And we're like this now. We're like best of buddies, even though she has dementia. I'm the go-to girl now. But my dad, I've never resolved that emotional wound with my dad until I can still do that. My dad has passed on since 2015, so I can't go to him, but I can still talk to him
Sure.
and let him know, like, I know and forgive him, that he wasn't the dad and he didn't know how to love me. And so it's like I can heal that wound so that I can have that and bring that person into my life then so that energy is no longer looking for an emotionally unavailable person to a person who is emotionally available.
Mm, mm. I
That's
felt
the
all
exist
that.
that's the existentialism and experientialism at its best.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I felt all that too. I felt it
Yeah.
all.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Um, yeah. So with all that going on, I mean, do you have anything else going on besides your
Oh,
company
yes,
and
I do. I have another company called the Divine Fusion Studios where we actually incorporate ritual and movement. The
what's it
ritual,
called?
like Divine Fusion Studios.com,
Oh goodness.
just like Earthways Healing, ewhealing.com.
Oh wow. Okay.
So
EW
we
Healing
do
dot
so
com.
we do retreats and we do events and we have like it's more focused toward the women right now because there's a lot of hurting women out there. And
I heard people out here, Diane.
yeah, a lot of hurt
It
all the way
just
around.
yeah. But
I guess it's
you use the word mask. We as men we've learned to mask it, and I
yeah.
said that on previous interviews that we as men we learned how to mask it. We
Mhm.
learned how to smile when we're in pain.
Absolutely. Not taught how to express it.
No,
You know, I guess that's one of the things I taught my boys was it's okay to be a person, to be human, and it's okay to be mad and angry and how to express it appropriately, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
And luckily, I don't know where that came because I wasn't a therapist when I was raising them, and like I said, I was winging it left and right, and I chose not to
All of us winged
raise
it when
my
we
hands.
became parents.
I tell it to every client that comes in. I says our parents were fucking us up left and right, because they were winging
Yeah,
it.
we're winging it. What's that? Fake it till you make it.
They didn't know they were kids raising kids. We were all kids raising kids.
Yeah,
And people
yeah.
don't realize that our brains are not developed until we're 26,
Goodness gracious
you
me.
know? And a lot of us had kids at 18 thinking that we're grown.
Mm, we ain't nowhere near grown.
Nowhere near it.
Nowhere near.
Nowhere
God.
near like understanding how we were like how this was going to impact my life in 10 years.
Mm, mm,
So, yes. Um breaking the barriers, I wanted to break the barriers between, and then eventually I want to have like these co-ed events where men feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable in front of women and women feeling vulnerable in front of men. Women will show emotions, but it's not necessarily vulnerability,
Mm,
you know? And
mhm.
so, and even same with men, they can show emotions, they can emote, but not vulnerable. So I want to be able to create this space where eventually like the men and women can feel safe enough in a space where they can do that, and be guided and directed, with facilitators. And so I'm training some women right now to be a part of that and creating this program through divine fusion, because that's a divine fusion is fusing the divine feminine and divine masculine, and also like us here on earth and like that energy, that divine, like God energy, right, bringing it down, and like people helping them understand like what creator, what we put us here, not to
Mhm.
fight, not to be hateful.
Okay. So how can people reach you again, Diane?
They can reach me at ewhealing.com or
Mhm.
divinefusionstudios.com, or they can reach me at earthwayshealing@gmail.com, or they can call me 906-281-6007, or Facebook. I'm on Facebook too. I'm under Diane Littel or Earthways Healing or Divine Fusion Studios.
Okay. Okay.
I have an Instagram too. Do you want those? I'm on LinkedIn too.
Oh, okay.
I'm everywhere. I am. If it's got a social media or some kind of a pay app or whatever, I got it. I'm hooked up.
All right, you're everywhere.
Yes, I am. Quite literally for a while there during COVID, I was like the traveling healer. I was driving to Kentucky, I was driving to Michigan, and I was driving all over the place and it was like a gypsy car. And I know and I apologize if anybody's offended by the word gypsy because it is a derogatory term for a person. But to me, it's a positive thing because gypsies were magical, amazing people. And so my little car was set up like a little store. And like I had my healing salves, I had my healing herbs in there, and I had my massage table in there, and my eagle fan that I use for healing sessions. So I had all my stuff in there. So when I would go to people's homes and I would do healing sessions for them, and literally it's like I go on the road, I'd make $800, and it'd pay for my hotel, pay for my gas, and pay for my food, and be there for 3 days, and come back home, and like, it was wonderful. I was a bit of a vagabond for a moment.
That's what's up. That's what's up. Diane Littel, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about your life and your work. Uh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate you reached out, and I'm glad that you did. And it's not easy. It was a little like I told my son before doing this. It's like I'm a little nervous, and it's like talking about myself so publicly, but I'm really not that person. I'm very public about who I am. I'm not afraid to say that I'm a part of a 12-step program. I'm an alcoholic and addict and an Al-Anon member. I have it all. It's like, but it led me to the healing that I needed. It led
Mhm.
me to a space where I could feel healthy about who I am and like where I'm going in my life, and that there was so much more to come.
Yeah.
It
And
really helped.
yeah, and it's amazing how people can go through some tragedy, but once you're on the other side of that tragedy, there's joy.
Joyce Meyer was a big part of my recovery. Joyce Meyer's ministries.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know if you know, I know the good old
I'm
Joyce,
familiar.
might tell you that woman, my sponsor's name is Joyce too, by the way. But so uh Joyce Myers, where there was a point in my life where Christianity, I got, baptized finally, because I was not baptized as a kid because my mom was so against the Catholic religion because of the residential school stuff, the convert. So Joyce Myers was a point where she was talking about how, having a relationship with God, right? And that you just don't visit him on Sundays. It's like having a
Yeah.
relationship with a human being. You got to
Yeah.
show up for that human being, right? So you had to show up for God. And so it's like, oh, that makes complete sense. So it's like, I don't have to go to church to have a relationship with God. I can be right here in my home and have a relationship with God, which I choose to call Creator today.
Hmm.
Sometimes I call him Father. Some days, like it says, there's many different things that I call him. Goddess, she can be a she or they, I don't know. We don't really know what the sex of God is.
It's irrelevant, you know what I'm saying?
Right,
We,
right.
we know who, we
It's
know
God. It is it. It's just it.
uh,
But
yeah,
yeah, it's a
yeah,
beautiful thing. So yeah, I appreciate your time and I appreciate that you reached out and I appreciate what you're
we,
doing and the impact that you have on the community doing this. Speak your truth.
yeah. Well, I'm speaking mine, and I'm making it my life's purpose to help other people speak theirs. You
It's a
know,
beautiful purpose.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
I'll help them know their truth and I'll send them to you to speak their truth.
Hey, come on with it. I'm ready. I'm ready for it. Diane, again, thank you for taking the time to speak your truth this evening.
Yes. No,
Uh,
thank you. I appreciate you.
all right. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross podcast. I always say this, and I'm going to continue to say it. It's okay to not be okay. Just
Yep.
do something about it. With that
Yep.
being said, Miss Diane, pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.